Join us now for a moment of faith with Dr. Joe Arthur, pastor of the Harvest Baptist Tabernacle in Jonesboro, Georgia. This is an internet broadcast that will air daily at 12:30 p.m. and will remain on our Harvest Facebook page for you to view at any time. This broadcast is to uplift God's children and to remind us all that faith is the victory that overcometh the world. Now here's our pastor with a moment of faith, Dr. Joe Arthur.
And greetings today to all of our listening friends. Thank you for joining us for a few moments today out of your schedule to turn our hearts and our minds away from the cares of this life. And let's look unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith. Let's see what God is able to do in your life and mine in a moment of faith. And I want to begin preaching this week on our broadcast on the life of Elijah, on proving God in a profane world. Proving God in a profane world. In a time of trouble, in a time of apostasy, in a time of crisis, God raised up a prophet by the name of Elijah. Now there's some interesting things about Elijah. One of them is this. The Bible said that he was a man of like passions. In other words, he was a normal man, just like you and us, with feelings, with emotions, with needs. But yet he was mightily used of God in spite of his incapabilities and his insufficiency. He's proving God to be real in a profane world. You see, that name Elijah means Jehovah is God. Jehovah is God. And in the world Elijah lived, it was filled with profane government, profane religion, and it was a world of sin. It was a world of spiritual darkness. But God, in the midst of that darkness, had a man, had a representative, had a prophet named Elijah. And Elijah is proving God to be real, to be holy, to be sovereign, to be omnipotent, to be faithful, to be eternal in the midst of a world filled with rejection. And I don't know of a darker day, a more difficult day, a more discouraging day in the life of the church, seemingly than the days in which we live. Our freedoms, our future, everything right now seems to be so uncertain. And sad to say that we live in a world where political parties will use real events to advance a personal political agenda. We're living in a world filled with apostasy. Some churches have fallen away from the truth. Somebody asked me, one of the great dangers of this COVID-19, I believe it's going to separate the wheat from the tares. I believe there's a lot of people, we've called them fringe people, that kind of hang out on the edge. You may never see them again associated with the things of God. These are difficult days in which we live. But Elijah's day was dark. Elijah's day was difficult. Elijah's day was a day of profane images, profane philosophy. But yet he proved that God was real. God was alive. God was holy. God was present. God was good. God was faithful. God is eternal. I believe today that God's looking for some Elijahs that will just let God be God in their life and prove in a profane world that our God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is a God that is real. He is a God that is holy, faithful, true, and eternal. So I want to preach this week at our gatherings on the days of Elijah when he proved God to a profane world. I want to begin today from 1 Kings chapter number 17, where we're introduced for the first time to this man by the name of Elijah. And notice what God says to him in verse 2. down through verse number 4. He says, and the word of the Lord came unto him, Elijah, saying, get thee hence, and turn thee eastward, and hide thyself by the brook of Cherith, that is before Jordan. And it shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. I've commanded, he said, the ravens to feed thee there. Where? This special place in Elijah's life where he is going to prove that God is real. Notice that phrase in verse number 3. He said, hide thyself. Now, in the next chapter, chapter 18, God is going to speak to Elijah and say, go show thyself. And he is going to give Elijah, later on in his life, a public, a national ministry that he will be in the spotlight. But before he can ever prove in public, before he can ever prove nationally, before he can have this ministry where he'll be in the spotlight, God says, first of all, you need to hide yourself. In other words, before he can prove that God is real to anybody, he must settle that in his own heart, his own mind, in his own life. So, for the first installment, we're going to look at it like this. He is not only proving God to a profane world, but he is proving God in his personal life. He is proving God in his personal life. Why? He can't tell others that God is real if he don't know. He can't tell others that God is faithful if he doesn't know. He can't tell others that God will provide their need if he doesn't know. So before God throws him out on the public scene, God brings him to a private, personal place where it's just Elijah and God. Elijah and God. I'll never forget when I first started preaching, God was good to me, and he allowed me to meet one of my heroes who's now in the presence of the Lord, Brother Billy Kelly. Brother Billy Kelly became a great role model. He became a great mentor to me. And we had gone to a camp meeting, and man, all the big name preachers was there, and the crowds were there, and it was an awesome place. And we got back to the room, and I was so discouraged, down and out. And I looked at him, and I said, Brother Billy, they didn't recognize me tonight. They didn't call on even me to pray tonight. They acted like, Brother Billy, I wasn't even there. And he said, boy, how old are you? Boy, how long have you been preaching? Boy, what would you say if they would have called on you to preach? He said, pay your dues. Pay your dues. Serve God in your personal life. Walk with God in your private life. Let God work on you. I will never forget talking to a famous preacher that had fallen by the wayside. And he knew how eager and thirsty and hungry I was to have a ministry, to serve the Lord, to be used of God. And he looked at me and he said, Joe, the worst thing you can do is jump up there unprepared. He said, Joe, no time spent sharpening an axe is wasted time. No time spent with you and God preparing you for what God has for you is wasted time. So God tells Elijah, before you ever go show yourself, you better go down by that brook and hide yourself. And he said, I'll meet you there. I've commanded the ravens to feed thee there. God had a there in Elijah's life. There in that there, he found the presence of God. God was there. In that there, he found the provisions of God. God met him there and gave him water to drink and food to eat. And it was in that there that he found the purpose and the plan of God. Oh, it may be nobody down by the brook, but some water and a few birds and Elijah. But God was molding a man. God was preparing a man to step out on the scene, and the world would never be the same. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to encourage you today. Before we can ever prove to the world God is real, we must settle that in our own heart. Man, I've enjoyed our time together today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow when God will do in your life and mine in a moment of faith.